So we were talking about soft targets before, and so I wonder as this is relevant thematically, and we touched on it when we mentioned Fight Club. Do you think as a society we've always been obsessed with violence, and is this obsession growing, or are we just more aware of it now?
Oh man, that's tough. I mean, I think I can only speak from my own perspective and my own history in life, but I feel like what kind of was the genesis of Soft Target was the idea that um, violence had become a sort of escapism that had
Mm,
been like further perverted, that it had become the basis of all of our fantasies in a way. I mean, if you look at
mm,
uh, like what's popular in film, almost everything is an action movie. And of course, I'm not
mm,
saying we should not like anything with violence, but
mm.
because I like tons of things with violence. I
Yeah.
I could subsist entirely on old samurai movies with geysers of blood and John Wick movies, whatever. I love all of that shit. But it doesn't make you think like, okay, why do we have such a thirst for this sense of catharsis? This idea that we need to physically dominate others, impose our will on others, and that kind of idea cross sect was kind of a cross section with the mass shooting situation in America and how I was personally reacting to it, working at a grocery store at the time with my colleagues, and it just kind of it was so pervasive that it just became kind of a running joke for us that like, oh, I can't wait till we get our mass shooting so we can go home early on Friday and stuff. And when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, that's really fucked up. Why are we? How has violence become so normalized that it's become a different kind of catharsis? It's not just kicking the ass of the bad guy in a movie and like a superhero movie or something. It's also hoping someone else kicks our ass just so we can escape capitalism for a day. So yeah, I think the whole topic of violence is very, very complex, and it's very interesting to look at on like the societal level. um and we're surrounded by it, so it's almost impossible not to talk about it. It makes me think almost, I just had a recent discussion about this, Thomas Ligotti's Red Tower, where it kind of ends on the note of like, whether you're talking about, no matter what you're talking about the Red Tower. Sometimes I kind of wonder
Mm.
if that's how it is with violence too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose the ultimate question, and we might not be able to answer this in this podcast because it's probably something that has plagued people for decades. It's just
Yeah.
like, we talk about that we all enjoy this violent entertainment such as the John Wick movies, and certainly for myself, like a lot of the video games that I enjoy too. So
Yes.
it
Yes.
yeah,
I
yeah,
exclusively play first person shooters.
yeah, yeah. So it does beg the question, when does it become problematic? Because also, the problem is as well, we see anytime there is a mass shooting or an act of mass violence, immediately there will be certain people or certain sectors of the media that will then blame video games, will blame certain types of music, and like it's not that straightforward, and it's not that simple.
Mm-mm.
Of course, often they will conveniently focus on different aspects of, like, video games and music, they won't focus on the lack of mental health provisions, you know. And
Yeah.
so,
And it's so you're so right that it does, like, the conversation seems to focus on the idea that the all these different art forms are making us violent. It doesn't ever,
mm,
you know, suppose that we are buying all these art forms because we respond to violence, that we like violence. Somewhere deep inside of us, it triggers something in our brain that we like, that we are responsible for the consumption of this. But it's not art's fault. It's a reflection of us. Art is made by people, and people, I think, are by and large violent. And I think the kind of the scary truth is that, this is a more of a societal malaise. It's not something easy to fix. It's absolutely mental health related. And I kind of feel like what I like about fiction is that you can pack so much thought and meaning and complexity and layers into a story in a way that, a sentence could never articulate what everything we're experiencing with mass shootings in America the way that, like, a story could. And I feel like that's kind of what I was getting towards with Soft Targets when I was writing it, is I was pumping everything I felt about the idea of violence as escapism, the grind of capitalism, societal malaise, and these urges towards violence and stuff, and kind of mixing it all into a pot. And it doesn't provide anything really easy. If you could take a moral from it, maybe it would be go to fucking therapy. But yeah, it's tough. It's a tough question that's not easy to answer.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see it kind of like it, I always kind of tie things back to media, and I always think of Scream, and one of the things I think of is like the little things that they mention at the end, and they even talk about this in the big reveal at the end of the film, is that the slasher films and horror films and violence in media doesn't create this issue. It simply makes them more creative. And so,
Yeah, I
in
can
other
see that.
words, here's the thing: it's like you've got to have, like, either one, an imbalance somewhere, okay, or it's in a passionate moment. You could have somebody who has had very minimal experience with any of the media that's out there that's violent, but if something traumatic happens to that person, and they see someone harming someone that they care about, then they're going to pull back from their memory of whatever they watched, and they're going to want some type of physical retribution. They're basically, at that point, they're going to lose their mind. If you see someone that let's say that you're, on a crowded street, and you see someone hit your girlfriend and your wife, or one of your children, or something like that, God forbid, and that person wrecks their car, and you've seen this, you could literally lose your mind, and you want to fight him with your fists. But if you've seen a movie that somebody took somebody with a crowbar or a tire iron, you know, then suddenly you've gotten more creative. Where did you get that from? Well, I got it from watching a movie, you know, and that's where that stuff comes from. A lot of the times people want to put the blame on stuff, because on the media, because they feel like they can control it. It's tangible. You can't control or quantify a mental illness. And so, in other words, when those types try to do that, they can't say, well, we need to control mental illness. Well, you're not going to control it. You can simply, try to acknowledge it, and try to help people about it. But it's a long game with that, and it's not going to give you an answer real quick. So they instantly go, well, it's the media, it's all the games, it's the music, it's this, it's that, because they can quantify that, and they feel like they can control it. And it's not really fair to those of us who use that type of escapism as a form of release. in a healthy manner. It's like watching horror movies. It's close as you can get to facing your fear. You have a safety net. You can turn off the movie. You can close the book. So I think it is a complex thing, but I think that their reason to go to that is because they can quantify it in their mind, some way that they can. If they, hey, if we ban this, we can stop this from happening. No, you're not really going to stop violence from happening, because you're not doing anything to address the actual, you know, catalyst of the incident.
Yeah, totally. And I think, one thing that was interesting you just said that I was thinking about was that, kind of the idea of, I think it's almost a very classic male fantasy almost. I bet people fantasize about this, of someone, roughing up their girlfriend and having that that social allowance of being able to act out and
Mm-hmm.
beat the shit out of someone, and being able to feel valid in doing that, or something. I always remember, my wife was even telling me, oh yeah, I had a dream, and I there was a bank robber, and I stopped the bank robber, I beat the shit out of him and stuff, and it was awesome. But I kind of think another kind of element of this is that with all these power fantasies, the reason we're so attracted to them now is, I think, collectively we feel really powerless in our society. And I think it's partly because of how big the world is now, with the internet and stuff. We're in 3 different locations speaking over, wires. The world is huge right now, and I kind of wonder sometimes, do we need these power fantasies because we feel so small, or even because we feel like, our governments and countries are not reflecting our values or something? Again, it's so complex and multifaceted. There's not a single answer. I think it would be hilarious if somebody was like, you know what, let's just ban Grand Theft Auto and all the mass shootings stop tomorrow. I have the distinct feeling that is not going to happen, and that will not work, because, yeah, as you said, it's not the media that's making these killers.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of soft targets, it is taking, I mean, this fantasy that I feel a lot of people have fantasized, or at least mused upon, the idea of causing havoc for an ungrateful boss. Now, that fantasy might not have gone
Yes.
as far as actually shooting up the entire workplace, but just like a kind
I'd
of
hope not.
mini, yeah, a mini act of violence. And I feel that soft targets, I mean, it shows us the reality of that. It shows us the consequences of that. And it also shows us the two directions that we can go in as individuals when actually confronting that head on. And I think that is kind of what that is one of several things that kind of distinguishes soft targets from, let's just say, like a gratuitous kind of gore fest. I mean, this is showing you, like, well, yeah, you could shoot up the workplace, but this is the reality. Like, it, rather than making it kind of appealing, it makes it ugly. It shows you it's gonna fucking ruin you. You can't escape from what you've done. And that, I think, is one of many things that makes this such a good book.
Yeah, well, thank you. And that's definitely something I kind of wanted to explore. Was, I even think about, like, bad dreams I've had, or dreams where I've done bad
Mm.
things, or, I wake up and you still, maybe you feel like a guilt, or, a sense of shame as you're on your way to brush your teeth, but the memory's already like fading. You can't remember what you dreamed, unless you write it in a journal. Some people are better at this than I am, but I can never remember what I dreamed. But still, there's a lingering feeling of just something being wrong, and I really wanted to bring that in. And I think this book, it is and it isn't about mass shooters. It's there is mass shooting in it, but I don't feel like the protagonists are really our traditional like mass shooters in the
No.
media. They're more people with power fantasies that are given an opportunity to act on them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that. And this might seem a bit of a left field question, but in my mind, this ties in particularly to talking about the tide after. But I'm wondering, what are your personal beliefs in terms of what happens after death, and what are your philosophical schools of thought?
I would say, well, first off, I'd say religion-wise, I'm an atheist. I usually say I'm as spiritual as a DMV. I don't really have any sense of magic or the beyond. That's
Mm,
just kind of who I am. I love though, like everything horror, everything supernatural. I love that
mm,
shit. I love um, all of that in my art. But personally, I don't really believe it. I see that stuff as more symbolic ways to explore interesting concepts. Philosophically, man, that's tough because I feel like I bounce around a little bit. I think like I I empathize with a lot of different philosophies. I like Ligotti's pessimism, but I wouldn't necessarily say like I'm a capital P pessimist. I respect it, and some days, you know, I definitely can fully relate to it, but I don't think I really live my life as a pessimist. You know, I've seen a little bit of myself in existentialism and absurdism, but I really don't have like a unified worldview yet. I feel like, you know, I'm pretty practical in my everyday life, and I actually, to spoil, I think there are hints of it in Soft Targets in the end. Is that what I really believe is that you got to cultivate your own garden, as from Voltaire's Candide. You got to exert control over what you can, make your garden better, the people around you better, do your best to affect change and be a positive influence in the your surroundings. But you've got to avoid being caught up in a whole world that you can't control.
yeah. And do you think that's something that you achieve fairly easily? Is that a struggle? I mean, because it you know, it can.
Everything's a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
I
mean, it's
mean, mm,
aspirational. I think
yeah,
all philosophy is a little aspirational. That we're all trying to fit it all together, and it's comforting to have like a unified worldview where you can be like, I am a pessimist. Life is malignantly useless. I can live with
mm,
this, and I can move forward, and that is my worldview. But it's life is very rarely one note. There's a
yeah,
lot of things happen in life, you know. I could say like I'm an anti-natalist, but you know, I'd also be stoked for my buddy if he was having a kid. I'd slap him on the
yeah,
back. I'd have a beer with him. I'd hang out with his kid down the road. I'm not gonna, you know, shun a friend for procreating. It wouldn't be for me, that kind of thing. Similarly, if someone is, while I might personally shun religion, I also get the comfort in it. And I know a lot of people who are religious who are perfectly fine folks who, you know, have no interest in shoving it down my throat. And they want to, it gives them comfort and they explore it in their own way and they're very happy. So, I mean, I don't know, man. Life's just fucking bullshit. We just got to do the best we can, you know?
yeah. That's the quote. Life's just fucking bullshit.
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
so
I
true.
mean, it sounds like your general kind of worldview is pretty similar to mine, and particularly the idea of just like, look, people can do what the fuck they want if that makes them happy, provided they're not harming other people. That's kind of how it goes. Believe what you want, do what you want,
Yeah, for
but make
sure.
sure that you're not hurting others.
Yeah, I'd say I'd probably align most with like an existentialist, but I'll
Mm,
also say I'm not super educated in philosophy, and
mm.
there's probably a philosophy major out there that'll be listening to this and be like, "This guy is a dumbass. He knows nothing." And I will say, "You're right. I don't know anything. I can only speak from my own navel gazing."
Right, right. And so, I mean, if the tide existed, what would you do differently?
Oh man, I think there's so many things, but also, I think I've ended up pretty happy where I am. I think one of the things I would do is I would have gone to college way earlier. I waited until my late 20s, which is a very boring life uh a life answer to this is that I feel like I waited very long to start my life as an adult. I was definitely in arrested development as in my 20s, just kind of, going to punk shows, getting wasted, working entry level jobs, and that was just kind of my life. And I talked a lot of shit. I wish I had kind of found a path forward earlier that was a little bit more concrete than just kind of like waiting for something to happen. Like I don't really, looking back, I feel like I wasted so much time. If I was really had some kind of title reality or something, I would have potentially tried to change the course of my life and been more active earlier,
Mm.
or spent a lot of money and gone to a casino and just gotten more drunk and more wasted, or skipped out on work. That's probably the honest answer. I would have skipped out on work for a day or something.
Right, right. And it occurs to me too that there may be people listening who we haven't fully defined what is the tidal reality. So I should have probably started with that. But if you would
Probably.
if you would give us a sense, I mean, maybe I did in a previous tidal reality, so I'm just getting bored of repeating it.
Sure.
But I
Well,
mean,
the
yeah,
kind of, so like the weird conceit of soft targets, I believe every weird story has kind of like a singular aberration that people bounce off of that isn't explained. Um, because if you explained it, it'd become a sci-fi novel. So for mine, it is that some days are more real than others, and you can do what you want on those days without consequences, and kind of the slate is clean the next day.
yeah, which is such like a delicious and trippy concept in itself. I mean, yeah, you basically got a free pass, but as we
Yeah.
find out, is it really free? I mean, that is the heart of this novella.
Yeah, it does make you think like is there even such things as like no consequences if you're like a human with, a conscience?
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
I would say, hopefully there is no such thing as absolutely zero consequences, that you do still have to reconcile with the things you've done,
yeah.
if they've hurt people.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you there. And I mean, you can imagine situations, and I'm sure we've actually been in situations where you could do something, morally questionable, or let's go further and say morally reprehensible, and that you could get away with it, that no one would find out. But I think, it's having that moral conscience that means like, well, you don't really get away with it for free because you have to live with what you've done. And that kind of guilt will eat up on at you. And actually, I mean, for me personally, I feel in those situations, the thing that is then more cathartic is like, you just have to confess, because it's actually worse to hold on to having done that. And I mean, you'll probably be both relieved to hear it's like, wait, so if I've said I will confess, seeing as I'm not arrested, I haven't murdered anyone, so that's that's good at least.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, the title reality, when I was kind of playing with that idea in kind of the ideation of soft targets, is that it was really influenced just by the idea of like giving in to intrusive thoughts. I think we all, to some degree, deal with some sort of call of the void, some kind of intrusive thoughts. I had always remember like seeing, when I worked at a grocery store, I'd just see like big old fucking pallets full of like soda just packed nice and tight. And I was just like, oh God, I'd love to just take a machine gun and just blow that pallet apart and see like the foam and it just explode and stuff. And of course, I'm never going to go buy a fucking machine gun and shoot up a pallet of Coke on a grocery floor. That is absurd. But, if there was a title reality, maybe that's the real answer to the previous question. Maybe I would go procure a weapon and just wreak havoc on grocery store products. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean that's like an interesting idea too, because it's like if you had the title reality, you could do something that would kind of be fun, but also be insane and would get you in trouble in like a
Yeah.
normal day. But there's no actual victim. It's like, well, he just shot up a load of Coca-Cola, then like he went AWOL on the fucking watermelon. That was really weird. And like no one got harmed, but I guess you got this kind of cathartic violence that we were talking about previously. So you got to experience that, but without actually harming a living creature. You just beat up a load of commercial sugar-filled products. So there you go. And you got
Yeah.
to see the reaction of your boss as well. Like, were they scared?
Yeah.
You just like gunning down Coke, or were they amused in some way? Did everyone in the office or the grocery store did they pick up a gun too? What happened there?
Yeah. Everybody's just like, well, this seems fucking awesome. We gotta join in.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the darker end too, like, and this is kind of explored in the book a little bit, is that you could explore death in a safe way,
Yeah.
which I think is like probably the most ever looming presence in our lives is living people that are conscious of our own demise. We will literally all die. Every human on Earth in the
Yeah.
history of the world has died, and it is
Yeah.
one of those things that you don't really know what it's like until it happens. And I think for me, death is a source of great anxiety, which is kind of why I
Yeah.
connect so much with Ligotti's work. And that's kind of another reason the title reality appealed so much to me, is like, if I could just kill myself for a day, would it be less scary looking down the rest of my life? Because I don't want to be dead. I like being alive, but I
Mm.
am so scared of death. And that was another thing that was going on in my life, is that I had a couple of, in retrospect, minor medical issues, but they were the first medical issues I had ever had. I
Right.
was living my 20s as I was a kid. I never went to a hospital. I didn't
Right.
need insurance or anything. But then you have that kind of first big health scare, and you're like, oh, holy shit. Like, I am super aware of the mechanics of my body. I had like a heart thing, and I was like
Mm.
constantly aware of my heartbeat and stuff. And it terrified me to be like, there could be a part of my body that is just failing right now. And I could die any second. And of course I was not dying. I was just suffering health anxiety and supraventricular tachycardia, where my heart beats fast, and it was easily
Yeah.
medicated and it's not life threatening. But at the time, it was very traumatic, and I think when I was writing Soft Targets, that was something I was kind of dealing with through the title reality, is that fear of death, and kind of also that call of the void, being like, could I just die to get it over with? so I can live the rest of my life and not be afraid of it.
Yeah, yeah, and I certainly relate to what you're saying about, your first kind of medical incident. Because, like, particularly, I mean, I used to have really bad arthritis through some diet and lifestyle changes. I put that into remission, but I think because I managed to so dramatically reverse it, I almost felt a little bit invincible, or like, well, I can solve anything with diet. Like, as long as I eat enough kale, then nobody's gonna stop anything I decide to do. But actually, then around the time that my daughter was born, like, I guess, like, about 6 months or so into being a new parent, like, as one, might understand, like, sleep and stress were an all-time low and an all-time high. And because of that, like, there were a number of incidents, like, a lot, like, just related to anxiety. And, like, yeah, there was an incident where I passed out, and then I realized, oh shit, like, there ain't enough kale to fix that one, to use the analogy, to continue it. And then, like, I temporarily, like, I just became paranoid, because it's like, well shit, it, like, kind of threw everything into question. And then I became so hyper aware of, like, yeah, my heartbeat and other things and how I was feeling. When I went to the doctor, he was like, okay, we are gonna take you for a full blood panel, just so you can see there is nothing wrong with you. You're in full health. Because, like, I kind of temporarily became like a hypochondriac, where it's like anything happens, it's like, fuck, I'm gonna die. I've got cancer. I'm fucked. And it's like, there's
That's
nothing wrong with
exactly what
you.
happened to
Yeah.
me.
And
Yep. I went to
yeah,
like the ER like 7 times in a year, and it was
yeah,
like every time it was absolutely nothing. I just was freaking myself out, and I had many drug tests. I had many tests. I had many, like random cardiac tests, and they're
yeah.
all like just telling me the same thing, like, dude, you're good, just you're fine. But of course, it's never enough, because you don't trust your body anymore. You've lost
Right.
that fundamental trust.
Yeah. Well, that was actually a thing too, which really fueled it. So one of the doctors, they took, like, a scan of my heart. Is that an ECG, an EEG? Maybe that's something
Hmm.
completely different. Anyway, they monitored, yeah, the heart rate and the heartbeat, and they were like, "Fuck, yours is, like, pretty irregular. It's got this spike where it really shouldn't have it." And they're like, that only really happens in, like, 70 and 80-year-olds. And I'm like, holy fuck, what the hell have I done? But then, like, when I saw
Like,
I'm on
another
my way
doctor,
out. It's over.
yeah, yeah. So, like, I stopped drinking coffee at that point. That was a particularly awful time, because it was like, well, anything that could in any way elevate, okay, most things that could elevate the heartbeat, I've thought of something that I wouldn't stop by. Most things that would elevate the heartbeat, I stopped doing. And but then when I went to see another doctor, they were like, okay, so it is like a slightly unusual heart rate pattern, but it happens in two types of people. Either, yeah, like, people that are like 70s and 80s, or it's kind of like if you're really fit and, like, you have more like an athlete's heart. And it's like, well, motherfucker, why didn't you tell me that? So it's like, it's just because I'm, like, in quite good physical condition, and you got me paranoid. Well, at least I can get a cup of coffee after this bullshit. I'm okay to be back on that. But that was, yeah, that was probably the worst kind of missing out key information that I've ever had from a doctor. Like, they were like, they shouldn't they shouldn't have told you that. They shouldn't have said that without like running more tests and analyzing it. So it's like, yeah, it's true what they said, but like we're also taking other things, the whole portfolio into context. And it's like, so you don't have to worry about that with your particular heart rate. So yeah, fucking traumatic, man.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I totally relate.
I know that I had another question related to that, but I've just like
I was gonna.
relived my trauma. I'm completely thrown myself.
Sometimes you just gotta let it out. Like I
Yeah,
get it, man.
yeah.
This is the place for it.
Yeah.
Soft targets is the place for it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, with the title reality, that you've taken something that's kind of like a really really deep and hard to, like, I couldn't write it out in a paragraph what it means. You made this thing very accessible, and one of the things that I like about that is you actually take something that's weird and you push it from the realm of psychological into a societal type thing. And that where it becomes weird. That's where it becomes weird because other people are affected by it. And it's without anyone else being affected by it, then suddenly all you have is basically you've got Patrick Bateman going, "But I did kill him. I did," at the end of
Yeah,
American
yeah,
Psycho, because it's all here. But you've
yeah.
taken something that's here and made it accessible in a way. It's almost like, I don't know if you ever read the Rorschach text, uh,
Mm-mm.
which is a very very well written, accessible thing that deals with basically memory and things like that, and chunks of memory being eaten by a literal memory shark. But it's written in such a way that it's accessible. I guess you could say it's a form of horror magic realism. But
Hmm.
what you've done is, and you make it so easy. It's so fucking easy. It's like, and it was when I started off talking about this. I'm telling you, I cannot write this thing down in a paragraph and go, "That's what it's about." And be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" It's like there's okay, wait. So reality, there's some days that are not realer. What do you mean realer? Explain that. How do you go from real to not real? I'm like, well, they're kind of unreal. So it's supernatural. No. You've made this thing so accessible. And it's like, and I know it's like, how did you do it? But I mean, it's like you might not even be able to explain it.
I
But
can say this because you touched on one thing that I think definitely did go into this because I do love American Psycho, but I am like very rigid in my belief that it was not all in his head. And one of my like classic pet peeves is like, I'll watch like a reaction on YouTube or something to the movie, and they'll always end and be like, "Oh, it was split personality the whole time." I fucking hate that more than anything. I hate split personality endings, probably like with my entire being. And I
Yeah.
did not want anyone to read my book and be like, "Oh, the narrator had a split personality the whole time" or something, and this is why all this fucky shit was going on. So I think I really needed to expand it beyond the scope of just the main characters, just so it'd sit right with me. And I felt like that it was that way, with like the newscaster and stuff, and the other elements they're seeing outside of their own world affected by this title reality, where it signals to the reader my intent a little bit better than so I give them enough that they can see what I'm trying to give.
Yeah. When I
yeah,
think about, oh, go on, Bob.
well, I mean, I was going to agree. It's just, to me, the accessibility on taking a very broad, what could have been a very vast subject. Uh, the part of it is like you relate it to people and how they experience it, and that's one of the things that I loved. It's like you really didn't need to explain it. then I guarantee there's somebody who's going to read this book and, well, how does it work? I mean, and it's like, okay, I mean, explain, explain the fun hole and the cipher. I mean, Kathy
Favorite
Koza.
book. Love that book. Thank you.
Sometimes things fucking happen. And
yeah, to me, that is the basis of weird fiction, is that there's got to be some kind of distortion, and you cannot explain it. You do not explain it, because if you explain it, it's not weird fiction anymore. It's
right.
like, fucking the Metamorphosis, Kafka, where the dude turns into a bug. Nobody gives a shit, or shouldn't give a shit, why the dude turns into a bug. No, there's no fucking chapter on the DNA coding that turned him into a bug. What's important and what's funny about the book is his boss like pounding on his door, being like, "Why didn't you come to work today?" And it's hilarious because he's a bug. That's why he didn't come. But the societal expectations are still there. I feel like, to me, my understanding and definition of weird fiction is that it has to not be. It has to not be explained. It has to be something characters react to, bounce off to, and react to. But my characters, they're normal people. They're not fucking quantum physicists or something. They're not going to be able to figure it out. They're just going to talk it through as best they can, use normal human 20-something dude language to try to figure this out. And I feel like that makes it more relatable and sells it more to the audience, because they're asking the same questions you would, well, like, how does this work? And I'm pretty sure, some of the even answers in the book are like, I don't fucking know. Like, I work in an office, dude. Like, I don't know anything about this. I figured it out. It's happening, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and you're right in that respect, that it does make it more realistic. Like, if we stumbled upon it, that couldn't in reality be the situation where I sit you both down and explain exactly why it's going on. It's like, it's just happening. It's just happening.
It's a tough conversation,
Yeah.
How do you sell your friend on that? That was like, if there was a tough scene to write in Soft Targets, that was actually probably the hardest scene, is the introduction of that and trying to sell it to the audience and the character, and making it feel not just like I would call it like a Graham Masterton, kind of twist in the story, like in the Manitou, where everybody's like, oh, it's a fucking ancient shaman possessing it. Fuck yeah, okay, let's go with it.
Yeah.
Which I also love that book, just because the balls for how he writes it, where everybody just like doesn't question it for more than like a sentence. They're just like immediately like, all right, I guess that's our only option. Let's just keep going with this. Let's get this fucker done in under 250 pages and move on.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess obviously, like, reading Soft Targets for the first time and not knowing where it's gonna go, like, and I don't think this is a spoiler, because, like, let's face it, what we've spoken about already would have already spoiled this. But I was wondering, like, well, what if what he's being told about the tidal reality? What if it turns out that Ollie is wrong? It takes quite a leap of faith to just go along with what your friend's doing. Like, if Bob said to me, like, I found the tidal reality, like, it doesn't count, we're just gonna go and we're gonna harm some people. I mean, I wouldn't go along harming people anyway, but imagining that I would, it's like, well, if you got this wrong, then there are gonna be severe consequences. So it's I
Bob's
guess
got to be a persuasive motherfucker in that case.
I mean, he is. He was a car salesman as well, so he probably knows what the fuck to say. But yeah, you gotta bring your A game with that sales pitch. And I guess too, I mean, it helps that in
It'd
the
have to be a product
story,
demonstration. Yeah.
yeah. It helps that in the story you've got two characters that kind of have less to lose. You know, if it was people
Hmm.
who were, you know, at the height of their life right now, it's like, well, I'm probably not going to risk that, you know, because the
Yeah,
payoff
exactly.
isn't worth it. Yeah. Um.
Yeah, if you're a homeowner, you're not fucking with any of this shit. Like you're fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Do do you ever kind of, you know, consider and think about what if this reality that we're living in now is not as it seems? You know, what if we are just a bit of matter being stimulated in a jar, as the old kind of philosophical idea goes? What if
I mean,
I mm,
every day, pretty much.
yeah,
Yeah, I think as soon as you start questioning the nature of reality, it's hard to stop. And I also think it's also one of those traps you can fall into where you become a little less human, and
right,
maybe so skeptical you stop being empathetic
right.
to other people. But yeah, I feel like I'm always thinking about like the nature of reality and stuff. I had another story too, the Mushroom Men that was in Vastarian, that also was another alternate reality story. So I've really been hung up on this idea. I think for a while that what what makes our reality. Is it our minds, our memories, our emotions? Like, is this
Mm,
reality real if someone drills ahead in my brain and my brain chemicals change and I start perceiving things differently? If I don't remember any of my past, am I still the same person? Does the past even exist anymore to me? I mean, functionally it wouldn't. So I mean, it's fascinating, kind of that intersection between uh, brain chemistry, being human, and the actual reality of time, and what is actually objective about reality. And is anything objective, because we're all little machines with little chemicals in our body that make us feel different ways. We're essentially all a bunch of different little warped lenses looking at what we can and hopefully agreeing on what we see, but we don't always agree. And I think that kind of realization was also kind of an aspect of my interest and obsession with like the nature of reality.
oh, what you've said has just conjured up so many thoughts and ideas, and I mean, you know, I think we're told that like a lot of the way that our kind of body works is like on a cellular level, and that there's going to be some scientists that are like, "This is fucking bullshit, man." It's just turned into the stoner podcast, but that like we're kind of reproduced to a point that like after every 7 years we're kind of a different person. Now I know that I've massively simplified that, but then that kind of linked to, you know, you talk about like, well, what if you do something horrendous, but then you're brain damaged to a point where you have no memory and you are now a fundamentally different person? How much should you be held accountable for what you did? Because it's like the person who did that is now that they're not you anymore. You are a different person. And I guess this is what the kind of criminal justice system and debates kind of frequently have when it's to do with like diminished capacity and responsibility. But you know, it's difficult too, because when something bad happens, we want someone to pay. We want there to be a consequence, but sometimes something bad happens and there isn't anyone to pay, or the person who did it is gone, or they've transformed into something wholly different. And I don't even know. There's probably not a question attached to this. It's just something, that I ponder, and it's just a kind of terrifying thing. And also just thinking about like how much should we be held accountable for past actions and past mistakes? And I think like a lot of things, there's like a scale. I think intentionality is hugely important too. Um, it's a fucking complex one.
Yeah, it's like, are you you, or are you the collective perception of you from the rest of society and stuff? It is really interesting. This is actually, exactly the kind of conversations I hope Soft Target starts among stoners in their dorm rooms for
Yeah.
the next 50 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too it'd make a fantastic film as well. So I mean, I wonder like, are you actively looking at like shopping the rights around? And also, I mean, as somebody who you said before, I believe that you were initially interested in filmmaking and script writing before you started writing books. Are you tempted to just write the script for this and to see if you can you can sell that? Are there any film plans for Soft Targets?
Well, I will say I was approached by
Yeah,
a screenwriter. Nothing set in stone. It's one of those things, uh, film rights in Hollywood. It's so nebulous, so it's hard to say that anything's in the works or not. But there is someone interested, and I've seen a first scene of the script, and I've really, really liked it. For me, at this point, though, I don't have any personal aspirations of like making a movie. I feel like, I've really found myself, and I see myself as an author now. I
mm,
don't need to be a director or a screenwriter, and I don't want to be the type of author that's just here because he couldn't do movies. And I
right.
feel like there's a lot of younger writers. It's just like, this is the next best thing because it's easy. And while that is kind of part of my story, I have a legitimate love of the form of prose, of books. So I am happy being an author, and I am totally happy having someone else deal with that entire world. I would love for Soft Targets to be a movie, and if anybody's out there who wants to offer me just fuckloads of cash, please do. I'll be here patiently waiting for the call and the check. But there are some murmurs. But as anyone who knows that has had these murmurs happen with them, that they start as fast as they stop, so you can't
Yeah.
necessarily put money on them or anything. It's just it's a nice thought, and I hope it pans out, but there's nothing official yet.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know that there are a
Mhm.
number of filmmakers and producers that listen to this as horror. So I think if you're listening and you're on the edge about, approaching Carson, then you absolutely should, because this feels
Yeah.
like it would be so ripe for film. And I think it'd be quite an easy one to adapt. And if you're like,
Yeah,
oh, well, you
the
think
rights are
it'd be
still
so,
available. Nothing
yeah,
signed,
yeah,
guys. They're right
yeah.
here,
Yeah,
I mean,
right
I'll
here
just
for the
they
taking.
there
yeah,
you go.
I'll just go out on a
You
limb. I think that Benson and Moorhead should do it. I mean, that's just me.
no, you'd
Oh,
be
that'd
Oh,
be
very
great.
that is so specific.
I mean,
It's like,
yeah, I mean, and
Bob
I'm going out on a
Carson
limb, but
will
I'm dead
accept money
serious.
from
Tag them.
anyone. He will accept money from anyone. It doesn't have to just be
You're right.
Benson and Moorhead.
I
Let's
know,
not
but I mean, it's
narrow
like
the
in
pitch.
reading it, I actually had those two guys in my head, you know, and I guess it's
I
because
love their
it was,
movies. They're great.
yeah,
Yeah,
I just seen something in the dirt, but I was like, this is something that they would definitely be interested in. It's their kind of weird, you know, so that's that'd be cool. But I mean, there's a ton of filmmakers that could probably do it just as well.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure. Benson Moorhead, if you're listening, send me your pitch. I'm ready.
There you go.
Uh-huh.
Well, we got a question from Lord Mordi via Patreon, and
Okay.
he says, tell us how you met PL McMillan and how it came about that you created a podcast together.
Okay. So I met PL McMillan in the Howells writing group, book group, Discord server, everything. They do a lot of stuff there. I met PL McMillan from there. Um, PL and I, we actually didn't really like each other at first. We were almost enemies, I would say, as far as anyone can be enemies in the indie writing world. But we eventually became friends, and we were in a book together, I believe. Yes, so we were in a book together. The that's what I call horror '90s anthology that had my
Mm.
story alive and living in it, and she hosted a '90s live event on Zoom where we had a lot of people come in for the release party. And because my story was written in screenplay format and I could not really read it very well in a reading situation, it would have been very strange for a single author to read like a multi character screenplay out loud. I ended up co hosting it with her, and we had a really good rapport. We had a lot of fun. And I ended up also kind of butting in and co hosting an interview with her with Patrick Barb, another writer I really, really like right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
If anyone's listening to this, you haven't read his story, Haunting Lessons, it is the single best piece of flash fiction I've read. It is amazing. Haunting Lessons, so affecting. I love it. But we interviewed Patrick Barb together, and again, we were like, "Wow, this is pretty fun. We get along really well. We like each other." And then, we were like, "Let's do a podcast. Let's do a podcast about indie horror writing from indie horror writers' perspective. We can just talk about whatever we want. We can bullshit, make jokes, and that's just where it sprang from. And we just did it, and it has been a blast so far."
Well, I need to follow up. Why didn't you like each other to begin with? And what do you think was the moment where that changed?
Okay, so what happened was that there was a couple things. I was coming into this group as like a total outsider, and everybody else was very like well established with each other, which is kind of like the story of my life, where I come into a new place,
Yeah.
everybody else knows each other, and I'm the outsider. And she had like this reputation of being a really harsh critiquer, and had been given the nickname Salt Queen. And for some reason, that just like it kind of made me angry. Like they were insisting on branding. Like I was supposed to buy into her brand in this group, like
Right.
this inside joke that I hadn't been a part of. So I wasn't like really formally mad at her, but it was kind of like one of those things like, I don't want to feed into this branding inside joke thing that I wasn't part of. The other thing was she was an editor for an anthology that I got accepted to, but I stepped out of because of edits that I didn't really feel like meshed with my style, and it was a respectful transaction stuff, but I think we were both kind of. She was like, "Oh man, that Carson guy is like a pretentious prima donna. He didn't like my edits," and I was like, "Well, that PL is trying to shape my art in a way that I don't appreciate." So we were kind of at distance for a little bit, but overall, it's very minor drama, and we're very good friends. We joke about it to this day.
Yeah. So we're relieved to hear then that if the tidal reality exists, you won't be coming after PL McMillan.
No,
So she will
no,
be
never.
happy to hear
No,
that
she's great.
too. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
and her novella Sisters of the Crimson Vine, it's really good. I really enjoyed it. That came out pretty recently, I think, from
Yeah.
Spooky House Press, I think. Yeah, she's a really great writer.
Yeah. Well, how did you get involved with Hells?
Oh man, I think it's probably that I was on. I think it was through the horror lit subreddit on Reddit, and I probably saw a link, and I joined up from there. And I've kind of been. I wouldn't say I'm like a super active Howls person. I kind of
Mm,
jump in and out, but yeah, I think I found it through Reddit's horror lit, and it was just kind of nice to find like a community of writers.
mm, yeah, yeah. Well, what is something that frightens you?
Death,
Yeah,
100%
as I
death.
asked that, I wondered if we were gonna come back to that because you had mentioned it before, and I actually
Oh man,
that
yeah.
that does remind me when you obviously mentioned being scared of death, you mentioned being an atheist. I'm wondering, why do you think you're so scared of death? What do you think it is?
Well, I think with living, we become addicted to being alive.
Mm,
We really like it. And I think some atheists, they really take a lot of comfort in that, oh well, being dead is just like, how it was before you were born. For me, I don't really find that comforting because before I was born, I wasn't alive. Um, I've been alive now. I know how good it is. I know, I can. It's almost like in some ways, it's almost like a power rush, right? That you suddenly have thoughts, feelings, ideas. You can affect the world
mm,
around you in different ways, and being confronted with that absence, that absolute void of everything, that death is so absolute that you can't even really articulate it, is so frightening to me. It's kind of a perverse sublime feeling that I think I still struggle with it, even though I've been put on depression, anti-anxiety meds and stuff that I think have really helped. And I didn't realize how much they helped until I like tried to stop them, and suddenly I was thinking about dying like 24/7. I was like, oh holy shit, I should probably just keep taking these pills. But yeah, it's just once you're alive, I think it's hard to deal with the absence of that because it is really all you know. It's hard to imagine not being alive.
yeah, yeah. No, I think about death a lot too, and I honestly don't know what I believe anymore. I was brought up in a religious household, then I guess I became agnostic, then I became atheist. Now I'm just a confused motherfucker, is what I am. So I guess it probably just puts me in the atheist agnostic camp. It's just like
Hmm.
I don't know, but I do know that I enjoy being alive, much like yourself, and so and I am terrified of death, and I try and think, well, why? Why am I terrified of death? Particularly if I think when you're dead, that's it. That nothing happens. I think too, like I'm scared of not fulfilling my potential or having procrastinated too much. And so there's things that I want to achieve and I want to do. But so it's like, no, no, don't cut me out prematurely. I thought I had more time. But none of us know how much time we have. So in a way that can be a motivator to just get shit done now. It's like you don't know when you're going to tap out of life. So you better make sure you're bringing your A game now.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, there's some
there's so
small
much like
yeah,
ego connected to being
yeah,
alive. You know,
yeah,
that's what I think about a lot, and I think about also like Ligotti and the conspiracy against the human race, and kind of how like being alive, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place a little bit. Is like you know a lot of philosophical pessimists, they're confronted with the idea of like, well, if you hate being alive so much, why don't you just kill yourself? And it's like, well,
yeah,
if only it were that easy. My entire body revolts against the idea. I was put on this earth against my will, and my whole body won't let me die. It's very scared of it. So, I'm stuck here being scared until I pass naturally, in which I will be very, very, very scared at the end, which is a horrifying thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is it that you're working on at the moment, and what do you have coming up after soft targets?
So I've got my next big book release is going to be in October. It's a co-written shared collection mosaic novel. It's kind of a very strange book called Post Haste Manor that I wrote with Jolie Tumajon, who's a fantastic writer in her own right, one of my favorite sentence level writers ever. And it's also with Tenebrous Press. It's like a collection of short stories and a novella that follows the rise and fall of a very, very weird haunted house. And we kind of we traded off writing short stories. They all kind of interconnect. It's very, very, very weird, and we're very proud of it. I'm very stoked for people to read it. It's going to be just bonkers weird. After that, Tenebrous has another project from me. I don't know if I can actually talk about it because I don't think it's been formally announced, but it is a similar to Soft Targets. It is a anti-capitalist diatribe dressed up in horror fiction, but this one's a little bit more folk horror-y and is more about kind of getting out of under the thumb of other people, and also involves killer scarecrows. Right now, I've got a novel that I'm shopping around called The Psychographist that takes inspiration from my marketing background, my day job. And I'm looking for a press for that right now. And currently, I am writing a Legodian sword and sorcery novella novel thing that's going to be, I think, very, very fucking cool. I'm very excited about it. About a death worshipping Conan type hero called Corpse, and it's going to be very weird, very strange, but kind of like a melding of like those classical heroics and also like philosophical pessimism and that like absurdist weird stuff that I love. And I'm excited to finish writing that and shopping that around.
Mm-hmm. You got me at
Yeah.
scarecrows, man. You got me at scarecrows. There's such an iconic figure, and outside of superheroes or supervillains, it's such an iconic thing, and you don't see much done with it. Um, and it's yeah, you got me. I got my credit card ready. So yeah.
That's kind of how I felt too when I was, thinking it up, writing it. Was that I was like, I kind of consider it like the Scarecrow as it's a Halloween store monster where you don't really see
Right.
it like in a lot of movies or books or anything, but it is still kind of like this, in a way, kind of like a lesser pop culture icon of horror where you're aware of them, but they don't have that presence. I was like, I need to write like a proper scarecrow horror thing, and it's just in mine. My scarecrows are collectivists who are. Well, I probably shouldn't give too much away, but I'm excited for people to check it out. It'll be out in 2024.
All right.
Yeah, it looks like Tenebrous Press are really buying into the good old Carson Winter fiction, because that's a lot of projects, and you had a story in their weird anthology as well.
Yeah,
So
in
yeah,
Haskins. Yeah, that was originally in Apex, and they put it in Brave New Weird. That's And that one's also, it's free online at Apex if anyone wants to read it. I think that's one of my best shorts for sure, and it's
Mm.
one of my personal favorites. So if anybody out there wants a free taste of my work, check out In Haskins on Apex.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I can't remember if this happened during our conversation or if I read upon it previously, or if I have just imagined this because we've been talking for so long now. But did you say that Tenebris initially rejected soft targets, or have I just imagined that?
No, that's absolutely 100% correct. They rejected it. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
I sent it in, and they kept it for a long time. They gave me a very very nice no, and encouraged me to reach out to talk about it more with them, which I did.
Mm,
And I talked to Alex Woodrow, the editor in chief there,
yeah.
and she gave a lot of great reasons why they didn't feel like they could support it, but they were also said that like it was easily one of their favorites, which was very encouraging to me because I felt like at the time I had this very strange book about a very difficult topic, and I was like, well, this is just never going to get fucking published. I was just thinking eventually I'm just going to have to put it on Kindle or something, and it'll live or die there. And so I talked to her about it. Eventually, I kept submitting it, but nobody really bit into it, which is fine. And then they opened again, and I sent them my other book, and they got back to me, and they're like, so soft target's still available, and they ended up offering me making offers on all three of the projects that I kind of had going, which was one of those big wins. I don't think I'm ever going to top. Like that was
Yeah.
a really exciting week for me. That that they believed in me so much that because they told me like, yeah, we weren't in the place to put out soft targets. We didn't think we could rely on our network in a way because it's such a difficult topic for a lot of people,
Mm,
um, and they said, but they also said like we couldn't stop thinking about it, which was also awesome for me.
yeah.
So they said let's do it, but let's put the content warnings, you know, front and center, make sure people know what they're getting into, which I had no problem with at all. I definitely don't want to traumatize or re traumatize anyone.
Mm,
And with that in mind, um, the way they marketed the book was actually brilliant. I don't think we've really had any big issues with the content at all. Seems like the people who are going into it have the right expectations. They know what they're getting into. They know what to expect, and they've been able to, enjoy the book on its own terms, which I've really appreciated. So it was a stroke of genius making sure to put those content warnings front and center.
all right. Well, that's awesome, and so good that they rejected it reluctantly, but then they just couldn't stop thinking about it. So they're like, "We need it. You still got this available." So, yeah, it's great, and it's also very well deserved. So, I'm glad that they took it on. I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to read it, and I hope that it is very successful for you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I couldn't imagine it going to a better press. They're great people. They put so much like obvious care into their
Yeah.
products, from selecting art to the marketing, just how active they are in giving this book the best release it can. It's inspiring and comforting, and gives me all the good warm fuzzies knowing that Matt and Alex are in my corner and they're fighting tooth and claw for me, because it's kind of the sad truth. Not all indie publishers are able to put that energy forward. I know me and my writer friends, we've seen many anthologies that everyone submits to, but you go and look them up, and there's one review on it or something. Nobody ever reads them. So it's great having Tenebris here, really pushing the book, believing in it so much, and working hard to find the readers that are going to connect to it.
Absolutely. Well, where can our listeners connect with you?
I have a website, carsonwinter.com. You can also find me on Twitter at carsonwinter3. I'm on Instagram at wintercarson. And you can always email me at carson.winter@gmail.com. And also, I'm on the Dead Languages podcast.
All right. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Oh, man. You know what? Check out Soft Targets, but more importantly, be kind to each other. you know, um, Deal with your bullshit in responsible ways. Uh, Strive towards self-awareness. How about that? I think that's the best advice I can give. Strive towards self-awareness